Okay, well, welcome to nuclear security. This is nuclear engineering and public policy 285. It's open to graduate and undergraduate students. It assumes some knowledge of high school chemistry and physics, but nothing beyond that. And for those who don't have any technical background, we've got a structure here to help you get through the course well. I'm Michael Knock, professor of public policy at Bowman School. My colleague Lee Bernstein from nuclear engineering. We'll tell you a little bit about each other in a minute. You should have the course syllabus, and you should have a project description. This is mostly a housekeeping session. I'm going to tell you about the course in some detail. So the basic idea is to follow and understand the evolution of nuclear weapons, thinking and strategy from the earliest times to contemporary issues. I'll be leading the policy side, and Professor Bernstein the technical side. And the aim of the course is that students come out of it with a pretty sophisticated understanding of both sets of issues and how they interact. The course is sponsored by the Nuclear Science and Security Consortium. For those of you in nuclear engineering, you know that the Department of Nuclear Engineering has won twice a highly competitive grant from the Department of Energy, the National Nuclear Security Administration, and NSA. It was a grant of $25 million for 5 years. And then Berkeley had to recompete against other top schools in the country, MIT, Michigan, North Carolina State, Texas A&M, and won again $25 million for 5 years. So the NSSC is an elaborate consortium of different institutions involved in research and teaching in this subject area. We have held this course for a number of years, and the chair of nuclear engineering, Carl Van Bibber, will also be lecturing in this class. Appearing on Monday. But Lee and I will shoulder most of the lectures. We're ably assisted by Sammy Lewis and Molly Potter and Sarah Lederman, who's a graduate student in both departments, in engineering and public policy, will be handling the video aspects. The part of the arrangement here is that this course will be web streamed to every member of the Nuclear Science and Security Consortium. So University of Texas, Knoxville, several other institutions are consortium members. They'll be able to watch what we're doing and perhaps even participate. We've had that in the past, Sarah. I'm not sure if it works that way. Okay. We have a mix of roughly 2/3 technical people, 1/3 non-technical people. We're determined to make this a very user-friendly course so that non-technical people don't feel that they're in the wrong place. Now, I'll say a few words about what I'll be covering, and then Professor Bernstein will do the same. So, the material I'm covering are mostly from books. There will be some memos and government documents distributed as well. For example, I don't know if you followed it, but the Trump administration nuclear posture review was just released in it's called a pre-decisional mode. But it's the front page of today's New York Times. So You'll be getting a copy of that, and we'll be analyzing that as we move along. But for the most part, the material comes from these books. They should be available in the bookstore. One was delivered wet and was returned, but there is a dry copy. Wizards of Armageddon by Fred Kaplan. This is an amazing book. Kaplan's a very gifted writer. It basically tells the story of how U.S. nuclear strategy evolved from the detonation of the bombs in 1945 until the end of the Cold War around 1990. I attack different aspects of the book. It's not that you have to memorize all the material, but you'll see how it goes along. Brad Roberts, who's a prominent figure in the field and directs the research center at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, has written a book, The Case for U.S. Nuclear Weapons in the 21st Century. And it has many important dimensions to the argument. He and I worked together in the Pentagon in the first Obama administration. He stayed throughout the first Obama term and was a key implementer of the nuclear posture review of that time. The one that just came out is a successor to that. We're also trying to get Brad to come here and lecture on this material. Third book by a bright young Stanford and MIT student, Vipin Naran, Nuclear Strategy in the Modern Era, Regional Powers. So this is about the other nuclear powers, not the US and the Russians. It's about India, China, Pakistan, and others. And he has a whole theoretical framework how to think about it. Very important academic study. And the final book by Gordon Chang. Gordon is an Indian American, and he wrote this book several years ago, but a lot of it is still relevant. Nuclear Showdown, North Korea Takes on the World. It doesn't have the latest information, but we'll provide that. Obviously, that's a fast-breaking matter, and we'll keep you abreast of what's going on. So those are the main readings for the policy side of the course. Maybe I should stop here and turn to you, Lee, for technical and how you're going to do the readings.
Okay, so I can, I'll just do that and then go back and let you resume, and then I'll do the rest of the intro later. I think for the technical side of this, most of the lecture material is going to stand on its own. I will post not just the slides that I present, but also the lecture notes that I have behind them. For those of you, about two-thirds of you have taken 101 or 210M with me, okay, this is going to be really basic and very review-oriented. I'll try to throw tidbits in about that. A lot of the material, the reading material, I'm going to access and put up on the web, one after another. So I use B-Course. I'm assuming everybody here is comfortable using B-Courses to download materials and get stuff. So I've already put a number of things in there under a folder called Bernstein Lecture Materials, okay? Including a couple of very good articles on nuclear forensics, which I thought would be useful. But I'm going to be picking and choosing things individually and putting up there. There's also stuff there from a nuclear weapons orientation course that I took. I can't believe I'm saying this now. 20 years ago, at Lawrence Livermore Lab, I excerpted a few sections of that and put that up there as well. So I believe that that's going to be the totality of my stuff. I'm going to be adding to those folders as the material becomes relevant, and let you go ahead and take a look at it. But please, in all means, right now, go ahead and download it, take a look at that stuff ahead. It's fine to read it.
And Leo was signing homework says.
Yes. So, yeah, I can speak. Okay, speaking to the grading thing. So we will be assigning homeworks, and there will be an midterm. Okay. I've been told by lots of wise people who've taken this course before that that's essential. that there actually be a midterm and that it be meaningful, which means that you actually need to study up for it and prepare it. The material really will be appropriate for the non-technical people in the class. You will not be exceeding that level. I'll look at the course grades as they come in. It really looks like there is a bimodal distribution. So if that scares you, then it may mean that there is one. If it really looks like there's a bimodal distribution of grades, I'm happy to renormalize them separately to make sure that we don't end up varying people whose background is not directly in nuclear engineering. Okay. There will also be regular homework assignments that I'll be working with Sammy on developing. I've actually written up a couple of questions and plan to lecture towards those homework assignments. Okay, and in general, I'm happy if people have technical questions along the way, particularly if you have never had, raise your hand if you've never had a technical course before in college, not high school. Good. Just okay, don't. That's great. By all means, feel free to send me an email, and we can set up some time to chat and make sure that we don't fall behind when you get that. Okay. I think that's enough for now on the grading aspect.
On the policy side, I'll offer discussion questions for you to think about before each class. So be prepared to contribute in the class discussion on those questions. The NSSC, I mentioned, has a number of activities, and one is a nuclear policy working group. Sarah's going to say a word about that.
Yeah, so if this isn't enough nuclear policy in your life, you can, every Tuesday evening at 5:30, the nuclear policy working group meets. We've got some great speakers coming in this semester. We're focusing on emerging technology and how that affects nuclear stability, strategic stability, which I'm sure Professor Knapp will get into this semester. And next week we have somebody coming in talking about the Russian strategy and how non-nuclear technologies affect their nuclear posture. And then the following week we have a speaker coming in talking about the Trump NPR process. So that will again directly feed into this class. If you have any questions, feel free to talk to me, shoot me an email, or you can visit our website at npwg.berkeley.edu. There's a lot of members in this class too, so you can talk to them about it as well.
Lee and I both will have office hours. Mine are Wednesday 3:30 to 5. These are Monday 3:30 to 5. And we also are going to talk about a discussion session. Sammy, do you want to say a word about that?
Yeah, so Molly and I will be holding a joint discussion section. We'll send out a poll to try and schedule the best time. It'll be an optional discussion section, but the goal will mostly be to expand on the course material, discuss what's happening, and also when we get into the project, provide time for you to come ask us questions and discuss with each other. And I'll also be scheduling a separate office hour for homework help specifically with the technical homework. So the discussions will be mostly focused on the project and the course as a whole. And then if you want to ask specific questions about the homework, there will be a separate office hour for that.
Any questions so far? We're throwing a lot of stuff at you. It's a somewhat elaborate course.
Does anyone need a copy of the syllabus and the project?
So let me turn now to the project. In the syllabus, it says that the division of your grade is the midterm, 25%. And the midterm will have a set of technical questions in which there's choice, and a set of policy questions in which there's choice, 50-50. The homeworks that Mr. Bernstein will assign that you need to submit the answers to. Class participation you take very seriously. You keep a record, not copious detailed notes, but you know who's participating, who isn't. Don't be a free rider. Don't be quiet. Speak up. This is learning by thinking and speaking. There will be a crisis simulation. We'll get into that later in the semester. The world is so fraught with uncertainty that I don't think we'll have trouble finding a topic. That'll be toward the end of the semester. And then the project. So the project, as we run this class for a number of years with the project, and we have combat experience on what goes well and what doesn't. and Sammy has been on both sides of the fence here. I'll just say a couple of words about the project. We've chosen a topic. You see here, policy and technical recommendations to forestall Japan and South Korea nuclear weapons. So the argument behind the project is that the North Korean sets of activities are sufficiently inflammatory that it's causing worry in capitals all over the world, and no more so than in Seoul and in Tokyo. Now, it turns out both South Korea and Japan have flirted with their own nuclear weapons programs in the past, but never fully went down that road. So we are hypothesizing, this is purely a hypothetical case, that the U.S. learns that there are serious plans in both capitals to develop independent nuclear capabilities. And U.S. policy is not to encourage that, but to stop it. So your job is to create a set of technical and policy recommendations that the U.S. government could implement that would forestall those independent programs. It takes a while for students to warm up to these project topics, and we have a structure to try to get you to warm up a little sooner rather than a little later. Sammy?
Yeah, I can comment on that. So the project is going to be the class as a whole working together, but you'll divide yourselves up into groups. So we'll provide the structure for you to do that, but you will be responsible for forming your own groups. So we'll start out with a couple of discussion topics on e-courses, where you can start discussing how you think the project should be organized, what kinds of topics you're personally interested in. But from then on, it's up to you to organize how you want to function as a group and how you as a class want to function as a whole. And we'll also be having memos. This is discussed in the project document that you have, where groups will be regularly updating us on the progress. This is very, very brief, and there will be a template that you can fill in, but this will just be something to have Molly and I have the ability to regularly check in on all the groups and make sure everybody's on the right track, people are communicating with each other, and it's also just another opportunity for the person who cares it that week to get some participation. And this will be, there are specific dates outlined in the project description, so not the week of midterm, not the week of spring break, and not the weeks that there's already class time discussion scheduled for the project, but it will be up to your groups as a whole as to how you want to delineate that responsibility. So we'll provide oversight in the sense that if we see any group going off track, or we're finding that there are two groups that are doing the same thing and maybe they should be communicating, we will provide a check on that, but it's going to be largely driven by you and what you want to do. And my main word of advice is just to keep in the back of your mind all the time that the goal is policy recommendations. So it's not a research project on Japan or South Korea. Keep in the back of your mind through this whole process that your ultimate deliverable as a class is a set of policy recommendations.
And again, the philosophy behind it is that, in this field, there aren't necessarily clear right and wrong answers to everything. So we're encouraging you to think creatively and independently about this topic. And feel free to ask questions or criticize the structure or whatever as we go. That's fine. The class culminates in your presentation, you as a collective group, your presentation of the findings of your project. The very last class, the week of the final exam. And we invite guests from outside, members of the nuclear engineering faculty, others come and attend and offer their own views about what you've created. So we take it very seriously. It's a real opportunity for you to shine your creativity. Okay. Anything else about that? Now, given what's happened recently, we have some ideas to get your attention. I've gone through the boring stuff. He's about to get to the exciting stuff.
Thank you, Michael. So, so I am going to get to a little bit of exciting stuff, because we should do, you know, it's wonderful or horrible living in the world these days, right? There's always interesting things buzzing at us at our phones, and we had a nice example of one this past weekend. But I did want to just start out quickly by telling you a bit about myself, and don't worry, all of this is going to be up on the B courses as soon as I'm done. So Michael has soldiered on through, I think now I'm the third in this series, or am I the fourth of your co-lecturers in this. I really view my role here as being supportive. Okay, my first and most important duty is that everyone here has the technical background that they need in order to be able to intelligently address the project and the work that Michael just described. Okay, so really, I'm supportive. That's what I'm here to do. So for a lot of you who've already had 101 and 210M with me, either this past fall or in previous years, you know, a lot of this material is going to look pretty straightforward to you. I'm still going to go ahead and go through that material. Okay, it's really important that I do that. Please, I understand some of it. You know, your eyes may glaze over. That's fine. I get it. But I'm going to try to throw in tidbits that are interesting along the way. For those of you who don't know me, so my primary job is that I'm the nuclear data group leader up at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. We are an arm of the U.S. Nuclear Data Program, which is run by the Office of Science. And we're charged specifically with meeting the nuclear data needs of the applied and basic science research community while training the next generation of nuclear scientists and engineers in the process. So I incorporate students into all aspects of the work that we do, and I also have a wonderful cadre of researchers up the hill who work with me doing both experimental work and nuclear data evaluation, which is sort of like judging other people's research work and making sure that the right values are used for any sort of application. But that job's relatively recent. I worked at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory for 22 years. So I spent the vast majority of my career there. I kind of came of age there. I worked in all of the major programs at the lab. And maybe that's something that I can bring here as well. And I think Carl had a similar background. The difference was that I think Carl did spent most of his time at Livermore working in basic science. And really, I didn't. I spent most of my career working in application, some of which did include supportive roles for the nuclear weapons program. So, and I actually was a subject matter, I think I still am officially designated as a subject matter expert in the topic of nuclear weapons. Now, I really want to hear your questions, all of your questions. A lot of the technical people will have technical questions for me. I encourage you to ask them. Unfortunately, sometimes I might have to say, sorry, can't say, okay? And sometimes I'm going to be able to answer your questions, okay? So take advantage of that. If you do have, especially as you start moving forward in the project side and you have specific technical questions, ask them. I might be able to answer them, okay? And I'd be happy to do that. I think that that's going to be. Michael mentioned the Nuclear Science and Security Consortium. So I'm also part of that. I'm the point of contact for the labs. So I'm also always looking for folks who are interested in working with national laboratory scientists, not just at Lawrence Livermore, but also at Los Alamos and Oak Ridge and Sandia, for all our partner institutions in the SSC. And of course, Berkeley Lab. So there really is this challenge of being the technical teacher to this course. There's a few of them. One, we have record enrollment. Okay, we're currently at 51 people enrolled, and I think there's still one more person battering at the gates. Okay, nuclear engineering is 32. The others and I have a partial list of your majors. There are 19 of you, including public policy, economics, peace and conflict studies, political science, immunology, okay, mechanical engineering, and I love this. I mean, this is fantastic. This is Berkeley at its finest. This is why certainly I'm here doing this, besides the great opportunity of getting to hear Michael lecture on this material that he really is incredibly knowledgeable in talking about. This is the Berkeley tradition of multidisciplinary study. And the currency of that is exchange, which means that you have to be speaking up. I really do want to see questions, and I want to be stopped at all points in time. And you know the old adage about the only stupid question is the one left unsaid. You know, that's probably mostly true. Okay. I think the only really stupid question is the one that said that you already know the answer. You just want to show how much you know. Okay. So that's really important here because we're going to have a mixed group of people. And a lot of us have a significant technical background and others don't. So please, if you're asking a question and you really, out of curiosity or a real scenario, please stop me and ask the question. Let's talk about it. As I said, I'll try to throw in some interesting tidbits from time to time. So I'll do my basic work and then I'll throw in these extras. And I'll especially do this when we get a teachable moment. And we had a teachable moment, didn't we, this past Saturday? Okay. I really would not want. I didn't remember the fellow's name from Hawaii. They had this one picture of him just looking like his world was coming to an end. He was the actual technical guy who pushed the wrong button. Raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about. Okay. If you're not, then that's great. Okay. You've got a good insulation layer from the outside world. I probably also don't have a smartphone. Okay. So an alert was inadvertently issued to mobile phones that a missile was inbound and, quote, that this was not a drill. That's what it looked like, okay? It took 38 minutes for an ignore the last message to go out, okay? 38 minutes, that's all, okay? So we weren't quite at the level of Mad Max, the generation into like, you know, people attacking one another, okay? But I want you to do something right now. This is jumping way ahead towards later in the class, but I want you to pretend that that just happened here, okay? I actually had this fine sense of drama that I was going to send you all with Canvas a little e-courses notification right now. And Carl, those of you know me, like I collaborate with Carl, we're principal research collaborators as well. Carl Van Dimmer said, no, don't do it. He had this image, you guys could screen, shoot it, and send it out to the world. Please don't do that. There'll be lots of opportunities to embarrass me, okay? So, you know, so let's just pretend for a moment that this really happened. Because what this taught me was the level of ignorance that people have about nuclear weapons. When you heard about these accounts of what people did, okay? Some of them, besides, you know, there are accounts of people like, around and stuff like that, but a lot of people just went out to look at the ocean. This was a common thing. They figured they were going to die. They might as well see the beautiful ocean out in Waikiki Beach or whatever. See, actually all that pretty. Okay, but in general, the response was, "Oh my God, we're going to die." Okay, right? That was the response. So now I'm going to ask you, how should you respond? What is actually the right thing to do at this moment? Okay. And no, it's not to degenerate into Mad Max and the biggest kind of behavior, okay? What should you do based on the idea that I think we all would share, the common concept that we would like to live, okay? So we're going to revisit basically what I'm talking about, which is weapons effects. We're going to revisit it later in the semester. But I really think that it's important. I heard actually that there was another one of these that almost occurred, came very close recently. I just want to revisit it now because who knows what will happen in the next few weeks. And perhaps this will be very important training that you will use to good effect. Okay, I hope not. Okay. So, I mean, and be honest, because I want this to be an exchange. Who here thought if they were at that moment, who thinks that they would freak out completely? Thank you. Thank you. These are the honest people. Okay. If you did not think that you were going to freak out, okay, You're not being honest. I know what these things do, and I would freak out, okay? Because it would be horrible. It would also be, of course, larger, it would be changing the way that our world would look if something were to happen. It would be completely different afterwards, no matter what, okay? But, of course, you would freak out. So here's all of nuclear weapons effects sort of in one slide, okay? How do nuclear weapons kill people, okay? Number one and number two completely dominate the scenario. Blast and thermal radiation. No, this isn't radiation with that scary capital R radiation. This is heat, okay? The primary way, the vast majority of fatalities in a nuclear blast are that you are, and this, by the way, if you want to play games, you go out several generations. There will be no two-head games, okay? Really, what happens is that people are incinerated. They're blown up and they're incinerated. Another part of blast is what? Let's say you're fortunate and you're not actually killed by the blast, and the human body is remarkably resistant to static and dynamic overpressure, which is what happens. Okay? I should point out, by the way, that blast is the primary way also that people die when terrorists set off bombs inside of buses. There is a static overpressure that causes internal bleeding. But let's say you are out of the line of the blast. What's your next concern that you have? Yes?
Shrapnel and falling buildings.
Shrapnel and falling buildings. Can you define, that's very good. Can you define shrapnel a little bit better?
Inadvertent bullets.
Inadvertent bullets, okay. That's fine. There's a much more common form of shrapnel. I'll lump it into shrapnel that you should worry about.
Maybe the fallout.
Fallout is concerned. We'll get to that. Don't worry about it. Okay? Thank you. That's really important that you brought that up. No, after there's the blast, which means literally there is this shell. It's called the Mach stem that moves forward and it hits you right away. And if you're free standing in space, woo, you're flying. Okay? You're going to follow that Mach stem back. There's also a static overpressure that happens. But again, most likely, if this were happening out in San Francisco, for example, that's not going to be a big issue for you. This is the main thing people mostly miss. Bill,
You're getting at the prompt radiation, like gamma radiation?
Gamma rays, prompt radiation. Very good question. Mostly not an issue. Very little of the energy is in the form of gamma rays by the time it would get out here. Air is a marvelous degrader and attenuator. Very little is in the form of neutrons. Mostly it's captured. There's a lot of aerial, for the non-technical people, we'll get there. There's a lot of aerial density between us and San Francisco. You're all forgetting, and this is the important point, one of the most important things. Glass, windows. Get away from windows, okay? This is generally good advice. If you have the good fortune of having your cell phone tell you that a missile is inbound, get away from windows, okay? Because when the wave comes through, even a very modest overpressure, 1 PSI, doesn't sound like much. 1 PSI over a window like any of those back there, sorry to make you scared, that will blast it inwards, and that's shrapnel, right? I would consider that shrapnel as well. That's the big thing to watch out about. After that, really, it's thermal effects. What can you tell me about thermal effects, thermal radiation? How do you avoid it?
Go inside. Get something to keep in place.
Exactly. It's really that simple. If you go out to look at Waikiki Beach, that is saying goodbye to life. Okay? That's really not the thing to do. You have to get something substantial between you and where that radiation blast would come. A wall helps. It really does. If that wall is in a shabbily built building, it really doesn't. Okay? You won't die from thermal effects, but the building will collapse on you. We are fortunate in that a lot of our buildings are fairly robust in the Bay Area. Okay? But windows, they're really dangerous. There's nothing you can do about it. And yes, it could be safety glass. It doesn't matter. Like the whole frame is going to come out. Okay, it's going to be dangerous. Okay, so those are the big things to do. Mitchell.
So I saw a little ad in the 1950s for to avoid a nuclear blast, where you dig a hole, you drive a car in it, put a tar converter on, you follow your car. How effective is that?
It depends on where your car was with respect to the blast. It depends on the magnitude of the blast. So a lot of this depends. If these are Hiroshima type weapons, you can, and you're far enough away, you're going to be okay. If it's a 600 kiloton multi-stage device and it's a few miles away, you know, I'd still try because it's just the kind of guy I am. but I have to say that you're going to, you know, it's not going to be a very good outcome.
Well, they do have quickly make it moves, and it can be like hard to take the car size.
But you are motivated. No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
So they do their drill.
Yes.
And like what they told me is because of substation.
Yeah, that's a great, yes. No windows, you're out of line of sight from the thermal blast. The last thing to do is to go out and look. That could win you a Darwin Award. Do not go out and look, okay? The heat is overwhelming. It's actually something like 95% of the fatalities. It's really horrible. And all you need is some sort of barrier between you and that radiation blast. This is just, you literally get cooked. But it's not from an oven. It's a very short duration. It's all radiant. And it's very powerful, okay? So if you are looking at something when this happens, just try to get behind something else or make yourself small, okay? Now, yes, go. Yes.
So I'm from
What's your name, by the way?
Untitled Chapter. So I'm from India, and I know like in most of the cities we have like army cantonment sort of thing, and they have bomb shelters. And so I don't know if that's a thing here, but I know like in India they're like, oh, like you know, many people less than 50 in the bomb shelter. They just like put people to the bomb shelter. So I don't know if that's the thing here.
Do we have? I think we still have some around here. They're not labeled in the way they were in my youth. That can help us. They may change that around again. We do have shelters. I think that generally speaking, there's another name for them. They're called basements. They're kind of common in most parts of the country, not here in America, in California. So in general, it's going to be a place that's, if you're undergrade, then the thermal blast largely does radiate out. And so you're no longer going to present a large surface to it. So you're less likely to get burned. And of course, you're hopefully shielded from the blast, okay, which is really important. One other thing to note, you will not burn if there is a wall between you and the blast, but what will burn? The wall. So really, part and parcel of hiding, which is the right thing to do, is to know how to get out afterwards. So one of the things that we do, like every time we give a presentation of national labs, we point out the exits, okay? I mean, actually that's important. We need to know how to get out. So this would probably be a fairly well-protected, we move away from those glass, but a fairly well-protected room to be in, and then afterwards, you get out. And you know exactly what you do before you get out. You're not thinking, okay? And you're not hanging down the car because the building's burned.
Is there just like one thermal wave that comes from it?
There's, I mean, probably in terms of radiation, there are two. There is a prompt blast, like Bill referred to before. There is a prompt blast of gamma rays, of photons that immediately hit you from the actual nuclear event. And then most of this thermal radiation comes once the fireball has evolved and expanded to some extent. There's a point where your radiant heat load reaches a maximum, okay? But the radiation, that first hit of gammas and neutrons, if it's high enough to kill you, you're dead anyway, okay? That means you're very close. At our distance for a reasonable sized weapon hitting San Francisco, you would not die of a radiation blast. I don't even know for sure that you'd get sick. Okay? The truth is, radiation isn't what kills in nuclear weapons. Really, it's being horribly blown up and burned. That's what happens. Okay, the vast majority of fatalities in Hiroshima and Nagasaki were that. Okay, and so really, it's getting out of the way of that. All right. I have a couple other maps that I put up there. This is a great web page, Atomic Archive, very good to go to. Has anybody ever looked at this before? I went through trying to find things that looked good and comprehensive. This is a really good one to go to. And so it shows you how the breakup is. Some of this stuff is kind of strange because you look at energy partition, you see blast energy, thermal energy, nuclear radiation. Yeah, that's obviously at some distance. Go further away and all the nuclear radiation is just thermal radiation. It all eventually becomes thermal radiation by downscatter. All right, fallout. People mentioned fallout. So delayed decay radiation, which is a mixture of fission fragments, again, for the technical people here, which is the radioactive debris from the fission component of the weapon, and the neutron activation of the material, because nuclear weapons make things radioactive as well that are immediately proximate. That stuff is out there, and it is significant, and it is an issue. If there were a significant size nuclear explosion in San Francisco, it is unlikely that the majority of the fallout would hit us here. Even it's not a question of wind direction, it's that it will go up and go over, and like most of our pollution, end up in the Central Valley. Okay, so that being said, obviously, the particulate matter that falls out of the sky, not a good idea to hang out around it. Definitely good hygiene. Wash your hands. Now, don't take me as some sort of like, you know, Dr. Strangelove person of like, don't worry about the bomb, it's all going to be good. This would be horrible. It would be horror incarnate. But if you do the right thing, you probably won't die. Okay? Shelter really works in these situations. Okay? The real question in my mind is what happens afterwards. What do we do after that event? And it is what do we do? What does America do in response to something like that? Our actions need immediate aftermath and the delayed aftermath of this. The things where actually I can't give you advice about what to do. But I'm hoping that by the end of this semester, you can give me advice, okay, of what to do. Because this is a scenario that those of us who've worked in the field for a long time fear it's almost an inevitability that something like this will happen. Okay. So the country is aware of it. In fact, the international community is aware of it. They're trying to plan things ahead, but it's out there. Okay. Yes.
When you get an alert, does it tell you the size of the bomb?
That'd be nice. Hi, you've ordered a 600 kiloton weapon from Amazon. It's a coming by next day delivery. Wow. I guess maybe the closest thing I can answer, like you're asking, like, can we tell from the ICBM? If we're an ICBM, we really can't. We don't know what's on the end of those missiles. We don't know if they're single weapons or birds, which are multiple re-entry vehicles. Yes.
What's the like time frame after you get one of those? I mean, I obviously it's going to vary based on.
Yeah, you're probably not going to get that notification either. It depends, of course, on where it came from. If it was submarine launched that is off the coast, yeah, you're not probably going to get a notice. Okay, I mean that's the. If it's different if it were. So what I heard I don't know if somebody heard otherwise. I heard something like if it were a Hwasong 15 or 14 from North Korea, it would be sort of 20-ish minutes that they would have had if it was direct aim there. That's a lot of time. Yes, question.
So is there like a proper way to like deter that kind of missile? Like would they blow it up in the air when you attempt to do that, or would that cause more damage?
Oh, good question. Yeah. So no, in general, letting a nuclear weapon go off is the most damage it can do.
Yeah.
Okay? All things being equal, take it out. Okay. They're not, you'll have a little bit of a cleanup bill. We actually had a nuclear incident, which is detailed in some of the handouts. There's one of them called accidents. I'm putting it in accidents. There's a great description of accidents that were in my nuclear weapons orientation course that I took back in the day at Livermore that described one that happened off the coast of Spain. Okay, that really was a weapon coming apart and spreading all of the fissionable and fissile material out over the coast, and Spain's still a great place to go. It's fine. Okay. I mean, so the truth is that you want to take the weapon out. It is really hard to take out an ICBM. You basically have to get it during ascent. And once it's ballistic, And strangely, I use that term often in speech, which might be very morbid in this class. People are more use it all the time. They say, oh, that project's fine, it's ballistic. Okay. But once it's actually no longer accelerating, but it's just moving along a fixed trajectory, it's very hard to figure things out. And so they're sort of fire in there and they're gone. So, yes.
Can you know where the exact epicenter is going to be, like where it's going to be exactly?
I don't know who the you is here. Me getting a cell phone notice? No. I mean, as far as we know, it could be really far off, and it could be into the camp. Okay, I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, if anybody has technical contribution to me, I don't think so. You really, once it's going, and you don't really know until it's very close. They're very small. When the missile is coming in, the actual re-entry vehicles are quite small, and they're very hard to find. And there are often multiple ones. Other questions? Yes.
You said we can't tell the size of the warhead, but can we tell if the ballistic missile actually has a warhead?
Oh, that's a great question. Can you tell if a ballistic missile has a warhead?
I'm just certain that we do have detection capabilities that say whether if they shoot a test missile in somewhere.
Somewhere between I don't know, I can't say.
Well,
I mean,
U.S. satellites can detect re-entry vehicles coming through the atmosphere toward the target. So they can identify characteristics of the warhead.
they do spoof. Weapons are filled with spoof stuff.
That's
They're
right.
not,
Yeah, the attacker is not interested in making it easy. But the defender will know what's being attacked.
So that is trying to distinguish you the fast system. Is that the extent of range that I can tell if there's a loaded missile or not?
Well, it's easy to make it loaded and have a mass performance that looks the same. You don't know what that load is. If you're asking, like, can I see a radiation signature or something outside? Okay, because even that is hard. It is, particularly with specific isotopes, it is challenging to note their presence, and that's if I have a bunch of detectors sitting around it and people in lab coats. Certainly, if it's hurtling through the atmosphere, 10,000, 20,000 miles per hour, it's going to be hard to pick up a good clean rad signature with that. I don't know if it's possible. I don't know how much it would matter at that point, but good question. Yes.
Are those systems that United States try to install? I think it was on the terminal high altitude area defense. Are there exits to stop those ICBM before they go ballistic?
So I don't know is the answer. I know weapons. I don't actually know those sorts of things like that any more than probably you do. I don't know if you know anything about aeronautics.
Follow that. So first of all, there's very little data. We haven't had the bad system in the high altitude area defense, which is now in Korea and elsewhere, intercepting, attacking nuclear entry vehicles. So we don't know. They've been tested, and the tests have been sometimes quite good, but they've also been criticized that we have jury-rigged the tests to tell the defense here's where the offense is coming from, which of course the real offense is kind of telling. So, but you may have heard commentators say we have to do much more in terms of ballistic missile defense, and that's plausible. But how much protection will actually provide is really not calculated. And we'll get into this because there are multiple types of missile defenses. Missile defenses that attack a launch vehicle at launch, re-entry vehicles that are in mid-course, re-entry vehicles that are terminally attacking a target. So different kinds of ballistic missile defenses have been developed for different types of missions.
So, I love this. I did this in part because this current events offered me the opportunity to do it, but also I really love the fact that people were speaking up. That's really important that we have that sort of exchange here. So here's my little quick card. Okay, what should you do? Get out of a direct line of sight. Glass provides no protection. In fact, it actually is bad. Get into a building with good structural integrity. We're actually quite lucky here. That's the truth. And a lot of our buildings, our modern buildings are quite strong, and they would be able to resist the implosion fairly well. But absolutely every window they have will be shattered inward with huge force. So get out of that line of sight. Watch out for falling debris, which is very important because even if the building holds together, a lot of plaster and stuff will come down. Really, duck and cover. It's a lot like an earthquake. So getting in underneath things is important to be clear. These lights here will probably go. Okay, and if you're right underneath one, it depends on how it hits you. Have one or more egress routes planned out. Right, so the exits are there. Plan, because if one of them, if you see smoke coming in from one, you want to go to the other one. Okay. Fire is really a big hazard afterwards. So this is my kind of, I use this yellow takeaway box. I periodically, like, what's the point? You can survive, especially if you have warning. So here's the bad news. Okay. A lot of the threat that we prepare for now, we don't have warning. There is no warning. Okay. It's somebody smuggling something in. It's not a missile that departed some point, went ballistic, came back down. And nuclear terrorism is something that we really do have. It is reasonable to be worried about it. I'm not going to gauge its reasonableness for all other things. It's sophisticated to build a nuclear weapon, but it's becoming a little bit more commonplace these days. Okay. So if you don't have warning, that's the problem, right? And that's the most likely scenario, in my opinion, in terms of nuclear weapons that we have to worry about. But maybe that's changing. I don't know. Maybe now we're going back to more of the days of my youth, and I hope for your sake that that's not the case. So I have a couple of other like beginning technical slides, but I think this is a good place to kind of stop this conversation. But I'll put all of these up again on e-courses. And I just want to say one other thing. This is going to make you embarrassed. I'm so looking forward to hearing Michael speak and work with you on this. This is going to be so much fun. This is why I do this stuff. It's great. And also, I can tell you personally, for those of you who don't know who Sammy is, a fantastic, she is a teacher and really an incredibly competent person just in general. So it's really nice to work with her as well. Are there other questions, comments, discourse? Have I scared the crap out of you? I hope I didn't. Did I scare the crap out of you? I'm sorry about that. Go ahead.
What does go?
Oh, go ballistic. What does go ballistic mean? Good question. It means, generally speaking, that you no longer need the way we use it in the lab. It's one of these scientific. Is it used in common speech, or is this one of these things? It is, right? It means that something is going under its own force now. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to take any other active steps. So you can say that like a research project is ballistic, which means we've done everything, the data has been taken, so, you know, we know what to do, we can plot out where it's going to cross everything. Okay. There are a few of these phrases that I use that my wife, who's a political science major, by the way, undergraduate lawyer, I'm betting all my slides into her first. She said that I use there are technical statements and I just throw them into the speech and I don't like the aware of them. So I'm going to ask you to stop anytime you hear something that sounds weird. Like one of the ones I use is I say something is completely orthogonal, and now I know that that's not normal. But I don't know. So does that make sense to anyone when I said something is completely orthogonal? Is that different?
If you and I were playing catch, I don't know if that's good. We're throwing the ball back and forth. And I throw the ball to you. And it goes up in the air and it comes down. Gravity is putting it in what's called a ballistic trajectory. Parabola. Something like that. It's not going like this. So that's also what's meant by ballistic. And a lot of this stuff, the nuclear, has to do with ballistic missiles. Not everything. They talk about cruise missiles. They talk about other vehicles. But the ballistic missiles are really important. And that path of flight is predictable. So that's important too.
Once the thrust stops, so I can have an example that might understand. The minute the ball leaves his hand, it's ballistic. While it's ascending, while it's arcing, while it's moving, it's ballistic. There's nothing that needs to be done at that point. That's the technical definition. But a cruise missile would not be, because it really is underpowered. Sandy, did you want to say something?
I mean, well, we already, I guess, do people have questions about the project? We didn't really read through this whole thing, so look through this at some point, even if you don't want to right now, because over the next few weeks, you're going to be forming these groups. And so what we have set as the deadline right now is February 5th. By February 5th, which is a Monday, groups should be formed. You as a class should have discussed and have some idea of how you want to actually structure and organize the project. And so I think the best way to get started on this is to just have a B courses topic where you all can discuss, but it's up to you as a class what you actually want to do. And I will create B courses groups for each group. You're not required to use them. If you prefer to do something like Google Hangouts or something like that, there's all sorts of different ways to collaborate electronically and in person. So we'll provide some resources to get you started, but it's completely up to each group what you want to do. And you should also feel free to talk to Molly and I about different ideas you have. If you as a group have a couple of things and you want our feedback on them, that's what our discussion sections will be for. We'll be available for that, but we're not going to impose any structures. We're not going to make you assign a memo person or a person doing this and that. It's totally up to you, which I know can be a little intimidating, the concept of having all of this freedom and us just not telling you do this, that, and the next thing. But that's also part of the goal of this, is for you to think about what is a logical way to go about this process of finding the information and forming these policy recommendations, both within your individual groups, but as a whole class, which you can see the number of people in this room. You've probably never worked on a project involving this many people before, but that's not actually uncommon when it comes to research projects and when it comes to developing these kinds of things. So it'll be an important exercise, but feel free at any moment you can email us, but we'll have the discussion sections too, where hopefully we can pick a time where most people can make it, and then if not, it'll be available electronically too.
Good question.
I understand it's a very loose structure, but I mean, we're talking more about like 4 groups or like 20 groups.
Yeah, I guess you want your group sizes to be small enough to be manageable, such that people have enough work to do. So you shouldn't, for example, I would not recommend dividing into just 2 groups of 25 people and 25 people. Definitely on the smaller side of things, but I think you'll have to think about the number of different ways you can address this problem and how that would, so it is up to you. You could do that. I wouldn't recommend it. But again, we're not going to enforce any of these things. The only thing that is enforced that's in here is that every group must involve a mixture of technical and non-technical students, which I think is defined as students enrolled in the NE version of the course and the public policy version of the course. So we want people to be working together. We don't just want all of the nuclear engineers to focus on some technical problem and not think about any of the policy aspects of the whole class. So that is the one thing that when you're forming these groups, you need to make sure that you have some sort of mixture of people. And it is disproportionate, 2/3 technical, 1/3 non-technical. But you shouldn't, for example, we shouldn't have 25 groups of 2 either. So somewhere in that range. But
So we need it to be interactive so we can course correct.
mm-hmm.
We get feedback in the class every year. And one consistent theme is that we don't provide enough guidance for the students on the project. So we're trying to be more assertive, but not too assertive. In the real world, there's no instructor out there to tell you what to do. So it's kind of a collective effort, and it's tricky. Do get engaged. Get engaged sooner rather than later. Don't say, oh my God.
So after this class, I'll make a B courses discussion topic. Everybody who's registered should have access to B courses. And if you can't access B courses, send me an email. My email is on the paper syllabus that we handed out, because just to start off with, that is the one thing that we know everybody can access and look at. So I'll create a topic for once you've had time to read through this, sort of mull it over, start discussing just your thoughts on what parts of the project you're interested in, and if anybody has ideas on how to structure it. And we'll be checking in on that, but that'll just be a free form for you all to discuss, and then we'll have a topic where you can start trying to break up those groups. Again, this is happening over the next 3 weeks. It doesn't have to happen today, but we're introducing this today so that you have some time to discuss and brainstorm as a class, and come back to us for our feedback if you want it before those kinds of things are not necessarily set in stone, but before you really proceed.
One other thing I realized I should have just mentioned. So as Professor Knott indicated, I'm not going to be here next week, unfortunately. I tried to make it so that I could be here on Monday, but there's no possible way to get to DC in time. I'm going to be spending the week there. So Professor Van Bibber will be here on Monday. Our plan is that Wednesday, Michael did give the entire lecture. He'll probably be here as a technical backstop as well. And he obviously taught the course last year, so he certainly knows this. I did realize it would be kind of nice for you to know that the reason why I'm gone is I'm going to a road mapping workshop that's set up by the Office of Counter-Proliferation Research and Development to address nuclear data needs for non-proliferation. So it's going to be kind of neat. I'll come back hopefully with some material, which I will then incorporate in to the lectures that we get. This is a dynamic kind of ongoing enterprise, technically as well as policy. But my apologies ahead of time. I think that's the only time I'm going to definitely have to miss. But it's too bad that it's the first full week. Sorry.
Other questions? If not, I'd like to say a few words about the policy side of the class. From my background, I was originally technically trained, though, in aerodynamics, not in crew stuff. And I was at NASA in the early days of the space program, and then shifted into policy work. Worked in the private sector, then was in academia, and then was in government. And I've had a couple of nice experiences in the Clinton administration, Bill Clinton. I served as assistant director of the Arms Control Agency, which used to be quasi-independent from the State Department. It's now been absorbed by the State Department. And that actually gave me an opportunity to represent the agency in U.S. negotiations with the Russians and the Chinese on nuclear weapons and missile defense. So, there aren't people who can just stroll into these negotiations, or journalists saying what's going on. You have to be a government official, mostly senior people. That means you're confirmed by the U.S. Senate. And it was a nice opportunity. I'll tell you some anecdotes along the way about those experiences. And then more recently, I was asked to serve as Assistant Secretary of Defense in the Obama administration. I participated in the writing of the Nuclear Posture Review of 2010, the predecessor to the one that's just been released. And I also had some other nice responsibilities. There was something called the High Level Group. The High Level Group is a group that oversees nuclear strategy and nuclear weapons for NATO. And I was the U.S. representative to the High Level Group. And historically, the U.S. rep chairs the High Level Group. So I had a chance to interact with these many countries of NATO and get their perspectives on nuclear weapons. Also, another aspect of my own experience is sort of interagency process. Washington is filled with bloody struggles over every document, and I have many wounds, most of which haven't healed from some of those. So I'll give you some feedback about how that world works. So, nuclear weapons are horrible things, and they have horrible consequences, but that's not the whole story. The whole story is, where did they come from? You know, I mean, if we were meeting here in 1941, would we have a course on nuclear weapons? No. The first nuclear weapon that was deliverable was engineered by the United States and dropped in Hiroshima and then another in Nagasaki to end World War II. What was the technical background that led to that? They didn't just come out of the sky. Turns out the Americans were not the technical leaders in the conceptual aspects of nuclear physics and nuclear technology. We later mobilized to develop a deliverable weapon. We were the first to do that. Why did we use those weapons? What was the decision process like that led to the use of these weapons, killing something like 70,000 people in Hiroshima and 40,000 in Nagasaki? The weapons led to the surrender of Japan in the Second World War. What was that about? What was the Japanese decision process? These are human beings that have to make a decision after an alterable catastrophe from their perspective. How did Japan decide to surrender? After that, we have the development of the Cold War, intense rivalry between the US and the Soviet Union. And an aspect of the intense rivalry is a nuclear weapons competition between the United States and the Soviet Union. How did the Soviets get into the business? It turns out they had a lot of information about our program through espionage. We had a lot of debates in the US in the immediate post-World War II period, how soon the Soviets would get nuclear weapons. We were wildly off. It was predicted in the US that they would get them by 15 years, 20 years. If we detonated in 45, they wouldn't get them until 55, 60. They detonated in 1949. What has been the Soviet and then the Russian approach to nuclear weapons? It's been somewhat different from the American approach. And what has this relationship been about? I think someone in the back used the term deterrence. Deterrence is a term that predates nuclear weapons, but that really came of age as an element of US national policy. What do we really mean by deterrence? Quite explicitly. I'll give you some examples. And a very prominent strategist, Tom Schelling, an economist who won the Nobel Prize, differentiated between deterrence and compellence. What do we mean by compellence? To compel someone to stop doing something is different from dissuading someone from doing something. So there are concepts about nuclear strategy that we have to understand and be explicit about. After the Soviet Union detonated, a third country detonated, and that was Great Britain. And they did it for lots of reasons, including national prestige, to be a player in the post-World War II game of great power politics. And the French followed suit after that. And then the Chinese after that. Did they plan to use these weapons to destroy people in cities? What was the rationale behind their nuclear weapons proliferation? We use the term proliferation to mean new states acquiring nuclear weapons. Who else has acquired nuclear weapons since that time? Who else besides the US, the Russians, developers beyond the Soviet Union, the British, the French, and the Chinese? India and Pakistan.
Israel.
Israel. Israel's a bikini country. It's the only country that does not acknowledge it has. Every other nuclear power has said we are a nuclear state. Every other country has tested nuclear weapons. Israel has not tested. But yet, those who study it believe that Israel has perhaps 200 nuclear weapons. Why do they stockpile so many weapons? Who is it? Are they deterring the Palestinians? You know, what's the rationale there? And then we have North Koreans. And we potentially have the Iranians. Why would governments spend time and treasure to build these weapons of mass slaughter? They have lots of options to spend money and lots of military capability they may want to develop. Why nuclear weapons? Can they actually be used? Then what have been the efforts by the international community to slow the spread of nuclear weapons? Slow the spread of nuclear proliferation. We've developed treaties, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT, the Nuclear Suppliers Group. The US and the Russians have completed a large number of bilateral treaties, the SALT treaties, the START treaties. We have a new START agreement that was completed while I was in government with Obama. What are they designed to do? How do you verify that signatories to the treaties comply with them? How do you know that they're adhering to the terms of the treaty? You just take their word for it? No, there's a whole complex rationale for verification and compliance of these treaties. So these are some of the subjects we're going to get into on the policy side. This book, as I mentioned, Kaplan, looks at the relatively small numbers of very prominent figures who I'll discuss, who really formulated the basis of American nuclear strategy. I had an opportunity, when I shifted into this field, I've spent a number of years at Cambridge, Mass, at Harvard, and I got to know many of these people. So they're not just figures from abstract figures. I knew them as human beings. And I have some stories I can share with you about it. Did these other countries emulate the US policies, or did they have different approaches? How did they think about it? I had an opportunity to visit New Delhi once, and the father, considered the father of the Indian bomb, K. Subramanian, the very distinguished Indian scientist, invited me to his institute to speak on nuclear issues between the US and, at that time, the Soviet Union. And afterwards, he came up to me and he pointed his finger at me. Now, it wasn't personal, I was the representative of the West. And he said, Mr. Knock, he said, because of you, we did not achieve the Industrial Revolution as quickly as we could have, but we will achieve the nuclear revolution. It has to do with issues of colonialism, of exploitation by the West. There's a big, long, complicated story. So those are the other features of the business that you get a chance to read about. And Vipin Narang's book gives you plenty on that. so middle powers. What else? Gordon Chang's book on Korea. Obviously, if you follow any of the media, you're flooded by information about the North Korean problem. Had an opportunity not to go to North Korea, but I've been to the demilitarized zone. I've met with South Koreans who negotiated with the North, and with a few North Koreans, and will give insight into their thinking about this. What are they trying to do? So it's hopefully a rich tapestry with technical issues forcing pace sometimes and lagging other times. And we want to know how the policy and technical interact and relate to each other. So those are some of the other topics we'll be discussing. Any questions or issues? Okay, you've been very patient listening all this time. If not, feel free to chat with us about the project or anything else. And we'll see you next time. Next time on Monday, Professor Biggle is going to discuss.
He's going to show the introduction. Energy.
Nuclear energy. And I'll be discussing a bit of the chronology, the scientific chronology that led to the development of nuclear. Thanks very much.